Welcome to the Scandinavian Mind podcast, our weekly show about how technology is changing the creative industries. Today on the program, a special report from Metaverse Fashion Week. For the second year in a row, we visited the Digital Fashion Week hosted by Metaverse platforms Decentraland, Spacial, and Over. We will get a report from the event and talk about why legacy brands like Hugo Boss, Tommy Hilfiger, and Coach are still betting on the Metaverse, how phygital has become the new buzzword in digital fashion, and which up-and-coming designers are doing the most creative stuff. My name is Konrad Olsson, editor-in-chief and founder of Scandinavian Mind, and I'm here with my colleague Erik Sedin and our man on the ground in the Metaverse, our editor-at-large, Oliver Dahle. How are you guys?
Very good, thank you. Recovering from intense days within the Metaverse. So glad to be touching grass again, as you say.
Finally unplugged the Ethernet cable. Get physical again.
Exactly.
I'm super excited about getting into this. We did a show from the last Metaverse Fashion Week. It was a lot about technical difficulties. I'm very curious about how this year's event took place. There's also lots to talk about in terms of where we are with digital fashion, Metaverse stuff, NFTs. We're kind of in a bear market when it comes to crypto, but still we're seeing a lot of international brands still betting on these worlds. So, but I guess the first most important question is, Oliver, how long did it take you to design your avatar for this year's edition?
Compared to last year, it became much easier this year, because last year I put a lot of effort into it, tried to find the right garments and what am I going to look like, and is this a good representation of myself? The good thing now was when logging into especially Decentraland, everything was already there. But I made a small outfit change, which is seen in the piece, a bit more spring inspired, but yeah. So compared to last year, it was a lot easier.
Good stuff. Let's get into it. And we should note before we start talking that you also have written a couple of pieces on this that are up on scandinavianmind.com, two written reports, excellent reports. And that's why I sort of wanted to extend your reporting to this podcast format, because there's so much in here to kind of unpack. But let's try to describe what this is to begin with. So Metaverse Fashion Week, second edition, as we mentioned, it took place on several different platforms this year. Oliver, how would you describe what Metaverse Fashion Week is?
That's a very good question. And I think to answer that, you need to define what a fashion week is these days.
Yeah.
Like historically, fashion weeks have been for buyers and press, etc. But today, they are becoming more and more important for the general public. People follow fashion weeks with a good interest. They become sort of entertainment, with celebrities and then with fashion shows. Are there any special events happening? Like we saw on at Copenhagen Fashion Week earlier this year, that each and every fashion show tried to have like a sort of social media moment. So the fashion week itself is becoming more and more entertainment for fashion interested people. So coming back to your question, what is Metaverse Fashion Week? I would define it as some sort of entertainment for fashion interested people. You go there, you could experience fashion in different ways, come fashion shows, come parties, shopping, or like just attending panel talks, or as we mentioned in the beginning, like dressing yourself in your most extravagant outfit. So it's not that much about really maybe presenting the latest fashion or to actually sell fashion to buyers. It's more about like gathering the fashion crowd at one place at the same time in different ways, actually enjoy fashion in a new way, which doesn't involve garments
Yeah, no, I
physically.
think that's a great way to put it. And coming from the kind of angle of entertainment, we should note that the first edition of Metaverse Fashion Week gathered north of 100,000 visitors or guests. I believe it was much less this year. The number I saw was 26,000, something like that. But I mean, compared to any physical fashion week, 26,000 is still way, way more than the participants of a traditional fashion week. Um, but you could also, I guess, compare it to the participants of other digital formats. We've seen recently that Roblox just passed 60 million daily active users. So in that context, 26,000 is quite little. So but given this and given this kind of view of the fashion week or the Metaverse Fashion Week as kind of an entertainment platform, a way to connect like-minded people interested in fashion and digital fashion. How did this year go about? How are they, delivering on this promise? Do you think?
Well, compared to last year, it felt that many of the brands now is much more invested to it. They don't just do some sort of activation and think that's it. Just call it a day. We have our space in Decentraland. People will just come there because we are this brand. People and brands and agencies are now actually trying to do something that engage users, that you actually want to be there rather than just showing up. And I think this was seen in several different ways, like competitions, like gamified experiences, like rather than just handing out wearables, you could had to complete a task or challenge to actually get the wearable. So many of these types of things, or like there was more storytelling behind what people and brands actually were doing. Um, so I think that's a big difference in general, that now brands are actually trying to engage and have a reason of being in the metaverse rather than just be there,
And do you feel
if
like
that makes
brands
sense.
understand the format better, that they actually are trying to create something that fits the digital context more than just kind of translate something from the physical world?
Definitely. I think it's mostly brands that, or most of the brands are understanding
Mm.
what users want out of their metaverse experience, let's say. Um, and the type of fashion people are using, what does it need to look like, and how um, you're engaging with the content in metaverse. And yeah, and just to add to that, um, many of the brands that last year were just showing up for the Metaverse Fashion Week, let's say, they didn't participate this year. And I guess we all could figure out the reason for that. But the ones that are returning is more and more um, engaging with their audiences and finding new and more interesting ways of actually building a good, entertaining metaverse experience.
I wanted to kind of just ask there. I know you're a veteran amongst regular fashion weeks. You've been to them all, and now you're also kind of a Metaverse Fashion Week veteran in many ways. So, but I just wanted to know personally, I'm just curious, do you see yourself using these clothes that you see, or do you see yourself actually enjoying the things that you saw there? Do you play any, are you a gamer? Do you have any of these digital platforms, or were you solely there as a reporter trying to get a grip of it all? Were there any like
No,
personal enjoyment for you?
like growing up, I've always been playing video games and grew up playing Sims and all these kind of things. But the last years, I've not been engaging with it that
Mm.
much. But when you start doing these things, it actually becomes quite fun, and you realize like now I tried to complete this task for 20 minutes just to get this filter or whatever it was. For example, Coach did this thing within their space in Decentraland that you had to complete a challenge. Don't remember exactly what it was, but you had to gather something like finding these things in the space to get a filter from 010 and AR fashion app. So I was trying to do that for so long, just to like, I got so invested to it. I don't know what happened, but
Yeah, it's the money shot. It's the beautiful. I mean, it's the best, it's almost the highlight of the reporting. The Oliver wearing his digital, what is it? Kind of like a scarf
yeah,
thingy with the Coach bag in your living room in Milan.
yeah, exactly. And I don't think the picture makes it justice because when you
Right.
are filming it, it looks very real. So, and then you felt like shit. This is actually something that speaks to me, not just on a digital level, but actually could be using physically. And like, could I see me using it for a regular day? Maybe not, but it was fun to try it out.
Well, looking forward seeing you in that's you're gonna next Zoom filter for our next meeting. But speaking of Coach, let's talk a little bit about what some of the kind of legacy fashion brands were doing, and then we'll get into some of the other up and comers. Coach was there, Hugo Boss was there, Tommy Hilfiger was there, a few others. How do you think these kind of legacy fashion brands are doing when entering this metaverse type experience?
Well, speaking of the brands you mentioned, Boss were doing an activation in for this year, a new platform called Spacial. That platform compared to Decentraland is much more reflected upon what the world actually looks like. It's much more stylized, and you actually look like a real human. So what they were doing in Spatial was that they built a digital showroom, they called it, with their new collection. And that showroom was inspired by their
Hmm.
fashion show, which they had in Miami a couple of months ago. So they were like trying to take that um, real concept they had in Miami and transfer that into the metaverse. And in that showroom, you could do some tasks and buy fashion from Boss in different ways. Tommy Hilfiger, on the other hand, which is to say the least, a metaverse veteran at this point,
Yes.
they
Yeah.
they had activations
Yeah.
all over metaverse, like Ready Player Me, Spatial, Decentraland, and etc. And they also had built their own like platform in which you could buy phygital fashion garments from the brand. Like when you got both wearable, but you could also buy the actual physical garment. And the thing that they did was to actually challenge this metaverse notion of interoperability, that you could just transfer yourself through different types of virtual worlds. So let's say you visited Tommy Hilfiger in Decentraland. They had portals to Spatial, to Sandbox, Ready Player Me, and so on and so forth.
Just to ask, how did those portals work? Was it a QR code, or did you just walk into like a portal in the game, or?
So these portals are still very analog. So You click on them, it comes up a link. You have to go to that link. Depending on how you're using it opens up a new tab, and then you get to the other virtual world. So there's quite a hustle still of actually going from one virtual world to another. And in some cases, your avatar has to change clothes, you don't transfer the assets, etc. One example of overcoming this issue we saw from Adidas this year, who launched a collection of wearables that are interoperable. They are possible to use in all of the different virtual worlds. But actually going in between these virtual worlds or spaces is still quite frustrating, I would say. And I think I've interviewed for one of the pieces on this, Shaylee Harrison, founder and designer for a digital fashion house called Mutani. And she described this whole concept of metaverse quite well, and that it's still very much a speculative future vision. And what we have today is more of several open worlds that we now can see start collaborating with each other. But it's still not just one. They're still working in parallel, even though they're starting to talk to each other. So maybe in a couple of years, we'll have one metaverse and we can walk just in between them. But as for now, we still have to go through this link frenzy, which is it is what it is, but we see development in it.
Oh, that's fascinating to me, and I believe one of the interviews that you did, I forgot who said it, but the metaverse doesn't really exist yet. It's still this kind of idea of the metaverse that we're all kind of pursuing in these types of events. But let's get into this idea of phygital, because that to me seemed like a trend, if anything, in this year's edition, where a lot of the concepts and shows were connected to something in the physical space. Either you could buy a physical garment, or there was these kind of AR exhibitions or AR shows. Can you speak to this phenomenon of the phygital and why it matters?
Yeah, one of the hosting platforms was the AR platform Over, in which you could build digital experiences on to the physical world. Like you use your camera on your smartphone or any other device, and you actually could build things on your phone, and which you then see on top of the physical world. So one of the things they did for Metaverse Fashion Week this year was that they staged a fashion show on Piazza del Duomo in central Milan. And so what they did was that you actually then could see these avatars walking on the square and like showing these digital garments, but within a physical environment, like really blending.
And the avatar is huge, big. It's as big as the Duomo itself, the avatar.
Yes, it is. And you also see all the tourists walking the square and taking pictures of the Duomo, not realizing that a giant avatar is walking behind them. So it's quite funny. But yeah, we also saw a lot of brands launching hybrid fashion, like fashion that exists both digitally and physically. And I mentioned earlier Mutani, a digital fashion collective from Antwerp. And they did a garment together with a designer called Stefan Karchev, which is exactly this. If you buy it, you get a variable and all the related assets to it, the NFT, all the different files, etc., which is required to have a digital garment. But at the same time, you also get a physical version of the actual garment. So you could sit at home and match your digital avatar. And yeah, the phygital aspect is becoming more and more important for digital fashion, I guess. The head of Metaverse Fashion Week, Giovanna Graziosi Casimiro, explained this in an interview as well, that they see the future of Metaverse Fashion Week becoming more and more phygital, that they want more actual physical events happening and engaging people more on a physical level rather than just becoming this isolated digital phenomena happening just within our laptops.
That is super fascinating to me, and I read that quote also. You have the head of Metaverse Fashion Week saying in the interview with Scandinavian Mind that she wants the upcoming editions to become more physical, which is kind of an oxymoron in a way. But do you think? I want your take on this. To me, the way forward for digital fashion, at least within the next few years, is in this phygital space, is in the intersection of something physical where there's a digital extension. I mean, we all live our lives in a digital world, a lot of the time, but most of the time we live it in a physical world. So it kind of only makes sense that where digital fashion should kind of bridge into a more commercial world is through this kind of phygital experiences. It's either that or just go full Roblox, where obviously the users are 60 million of them every day. Where do you see this going, Oliver?
Well, I think this takes us back to having a reason of being there. And where do we find that reason? And how could we, as users, find a reason of actually using digital fashion? And that could be related to trying on handbags with an AR filter. It could be by experiencing the storytelling of a brand on a digital platform, or that we actually do something in real life that we really enjoys, but then want to know more about it and keep on enjoying it. So we go into the metaverse and have a deeper experience to it. So I think when doing metaverse activities or activities related with digital fashion, it always has to have this actual reason, or like talk to the brand's audiences of being there. And it could be like very phygital things happening in both ways, happening in both the digital and the physical space. Or it could be like, which we spoke about earlier, Hugo Boss, which keep on building on what they have been doing in the physical world in a digital environment, just to develop like the whole experience of the brand. So the digital experience can't be detached from the physical. I think it needs to be very connected and actually speaking to each other. And there's several different ways that could happen.
That's a great way to frame it. Are there any other insights that we brought that you want to highlight from the interviews that you did? We have the follow-up articles with 5 interviews with some of the players that were engaged in this year's edition.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting or is that what they have been working a lot with, both the platforms but also brands as well, is that it becomes easier to be onboarded, let's say, to the metaverse. Decentraland had guided tours to actually show the spaces for users, like what you could do, where you could do it, what is happening, and having a schedule of all the events happening at the different platforms at the same place, but also how it became easier to actually buy things. At Decentraland, they now made it possible to actually use fiat currencies. So you don't have to actually get into crypto and all these things. If you find a garment that you actually like, you could just easily buy it with your credit card credentials or whatever you like. And and the same thing from Mutani and the phygital garment that they made, that they had this thing together with Shopify and Venly, in which you also could actually buy this NFT without having to get into crypto and all the terminology that comes with it, and actually know what it is. So also spoke with Boson Protocol that this year launched a Metaverse Commerce Toolkit, which helps brands and designers to more easily actually sell and create their garments and actually making a commercial activity out of it rather than just showing it. So I think this thing of actually helping people to be there and to understand what it is, this is something which also is very interesting. Because like last year, the first edition, there was so many people asking like, what are we doing here? What is happening? What are you supposed to do? And like, what's the whole purpose of it? I think to actually get people to understand what it is and what you could get out of it, this will be a way forward. And yeah, actually make the whole customer journey or user journey more smooth.
Well, I think we are contributing to that by doing this episode. Let's close out this discussion by highlighting our personal favorites. I'm getting quite a bit of a FOMO here when I hear Oliver talking about it. Erik, you've been covering the digital fashion space quite a lot in Scandinavian Mind. What, based on Oliver's reporting or what you've seen, what were some of your favorites when looking at this?
I thought what you said there, Oliver, about the Coach bag, the phygital activations on this podcast. I've been talking about it so much, how you need to have both, and you need to, in order to grasp it for someone that might not have a crypto wallet and everything, it has to be able to use an AR filter for Instagram and stuff. And I personally love that one. I'm actually a bit shocked that we didn't see more. So shout out to Coach for doing that, I guess. But I also liked that Adidas had like a big launch, and I like that kind of brand like Adidas has some kind of activation on there. I just thought that looked cool, but still, if it doesn't exist outside of the Decentraland, I think it kind of falls flat. So with that said, what I was hoping for was some digital experience, and this Coach bag that you mentioned with, what's it called, the True 10? What was the
It's a company called 010.
010? Yeah, that's it.
And
that's my favorite.
Yeah, no, it's a very cool platform, and they've collaborated with a lot of fashion brands before, and it's very cool how you could actually try on fashion from the runway just by using your smartphone. It's very
exactly.
cool. Even
And
though
that's
it's
kind of
maybe
that's
not the
kind of what I
most.
wanted to say. I don't think you need to pull up your computer and get your Ethernet cable out to enjoy Fashion Week. You should, in some ways, do it on your phone. I think, at least.
Why are you talking about Ethernet cable? No one uses Ethernet cable anymore. Everyone, it's on Wi-Fi,
I
right?
just know, I remember Oliver saying his computer almost crashed last year, so I just know it takes a lot of juice Might have to pull out the Ethernet cable.
Anyways, I really enjoyed the Mutani collaboration with the designer Stefan Kadchev. I thought it was a clever the installation named the Antwerp Cyber 6, kind of a nod to the classic designer collective Antwerp 6. But that, just in terms of creativity, I thought that looked awesome. Oliver, just to close out, what were your favorites? If you pick one or two that you really enjoyed.
Okay, so I'm going to pick two. So first of all, I would like to mention Institute of Digital Fashion, which made a collaboration with a physical designer, Bradley Sharp. And Bradley Sharp is a designer which has quickly become famous for creating spectacular fashion pieces within the physical world. So what Institute of Digital Fashion did was that they took his design and transformed it into the digital, which is the perfect place for that type of designer, I would say. Also worth mentioning is from a digital art collective called Vuelta, which have earlier been working a lot with art in the metaverse spaces. They have been participating in the Metaverse Art Week and things like this. So this was their first outing in the fashion, at the fashion scene. And what they did was that they had a tribute to Dame Vivienne Westwood. So they had this space which was clad in like what they called it, a metaverse tartan. It had all this like iconography from Westwood's career, like the classic store sign from her first store in London. Yeah, and a lot of references to her activism and these kind of things. And when I interviewed Bay Backner, which is one of the founders of Vuelta, she explained how like she sees that the metaverse has like this same subcultural energy, which relates very much to Westwood's career and how she built up her brand, and being a little bit of an outsider to the world and then taking it into this context. So that was something I found very interesting as well, I would say.
Well, good stuff. Oliver Dahle, thank you so much for once again being our man on the ground on Metaverse Fashion Week, deep into the trenches of the subculture of digital fashion. Don't forget to read the full report. It's up now on scandinavianmind.com. 2 articles. First, Oliver's impressions from Fashion Week, and then a survey with 5 interviews with people behind the scenes. This has been the Scandinavian Mind podcast. Don't forget to sign up to our newsletter. Visit scandinavianmind.com/newsletter not to miss out on any upcoming events and product launches, including our upcoming 4th print issue of Scandinavian Mind, which is coming out in a couple of weeks. Don't miss that. Until next week, thank you, Erik and Oliver.
See you.